Hello and welcome back in. This is Dave with the Believe podcast. And right off the bat, I have to apologize because I think I misspoke about the review process or the way that you can get comments in on the show. I think I had mentioned that Apple Podcasts has a comment section. They still do not. They only have a review section. So if you want to leave a review there, that's cool, and I'll read that. But if you want to leave a comment, and this is a great time to kick off at the beginning and end of my show, please leave comments for us to discuss in our community here. And this episode is all about the reasons why we go to church, or a synagogue, or a mosque, or any other religious outfit that you go to in order to practice your faith. So I want to hear from you again, as always, at the top of the show here. What are the reasons why you go to church? Or if you don't go to church, or if you go intermittently, what are the reasons for that as well? Again, please leave the comments in, I think the primary platforms that I'm going to be on are going to be YouTube and on Spotify. Just search for Believe Podcast. It's the same thumbnail with your host, Dave, here. So both of those platforms support comments for feedback so that I can get to it in a later Q&A episode and potential live streams in the future. We are on episode, I think it is 5 now. And so far, I'm a few weeks in after launching the podcast so far, so I got a few in the bank here, but I don't have any comments yet. And I will I'm not going to be threatening here, but I will say, I have a set number of shows that I'm going to record, and I need to get feedback from you guys. I need to have some sort of comments and questions and other things like that to drive this podcast. Otherwise, it will not continue for very long in the future. So please leave your comments for every episode. So this one's all about the reasons why we go to church. As usual, I'm going to have like my own roundup of what I've seen with other people, sort of like a pros and cons, or like this is what I've seen that are probably not the best reasons why people go to church, and then I'll flip it and say, here are some reasons why you should consider, going and practicing your faith, the reasons why you should go to church. And as always, I'll have my own personal anecdote and what I get out of it. Now, I'm going to build off of this, and in thinking about this particular topic, I kind of want to break it out into a series almost. I only really think of like maybe 2 or 3 different topics around the church right now. Like another topic that I'm thinking about is why priests and other religious leaders won't talk about certain topics. So that's kind of one of them, and that kind of deals with the church, right, and the message that they are trying to say or they don't say, like the things that they won't really talk about. And the other one that I have is really about the types of people that you see that are, quote unquote, claiming to be religious types of people. Right, so like the different kinds of people that you see at church, or that are kind of like byproducts, that are kind of, I wouldn't say using religion would be the right word, but that are, let's say, a little bit more heavily influenced by the church in one way or another, or they kind of are a little bit more fanatics, so they'll use scripture or the church or God for whatever reason, right? So those are just a couple other topics that I've thought about in this series, but today specifically I just want to talk about and focus on the reasons why we specifically go to church, and then I'll build off of that in the future. So this is kind of like the foundation for it. So let's start with some of the reasons why you probably shouldn't go to church, right? And these might be some people that you might have seen before as well. Maybe you've encountered, maybe you've got certain people in your family like this who follow some of these, kind of not best practices or reasons why you should go to church. The first that I'll talk about here is out of obligation. You shouldn't feel like you're obligated to go. Obligation sort of, to me, has a little bit more of a negative connotation. Just feels like you are, for lack of a better term, obliged to go. Like you're almost like, I have to go. Like it's something that it's part of it, right? It goes hand in hand, like, peanut butter and jelly, right? Like if I'm claiming to have some sort of relationship with God or being religious, I have to go to church. That goes hand in hand. And if you're thinking about it from that perspective, I don't think that's particularly right. I don't think that's correct. Now, again, these are all just my own humble opinions here, folks, but maybe you agree with me, maybe you disagree with me. Again, hit up the comments about that. But if it's out of obligation, in particular to another person, let's say, then that's definitely wrong. And then the other part of this that I see, which I just briefly touched on, is obligation out of God or towards your religion, right? Towards your faith. But let's take a step back here and talk about an obligation to another person. So I have a couple of anecdotes for this one here. There's one that I'm not going to give too many details on because it's a little bit more close to the chest, and then there's another one that still is with my family here, but I'm gonna dive into it a little bit more deeply, and hopefully this person is okay with me sharing this because I haven't asked permission for it. But yikes, I'm gonna go for it anyway. The first anecdote that I have for you is with somebody who's in my close family, who I think. And again, this is just my belief. I never really had this conversation with this person, but I think this person goes out of obligation to their spouse. And there's another reason kind of behind this, or it kind of goes along with this that I'm going to get to in a little bit here, in another bullet point. But I think the first reason that this person might go is out of obligation for their spouse. So, and this just means, maybe your spouse or your partner, your special someone, right, is really into the church and you weren't, right? Like maybe they have a background in it and you aren't. This is actually true for me and my wife as well. Like my wife doesn't really normally go, I guess, quote unquote, religiously or to any kind of set schedule or whatever, right? And I do. Now, this other person in my family, I feel like, goes a little bit more so, and I believe out of some sort of, it might not be like a huge reason, but out of maybe a small reason for an obligation to their spouse, because the spouse had the background, sort of like I do, and the other person did not. So it's one of those things that, when you're supporting your partner, you're supporting your loved one, you want to, show that support by showing interest in what that other person is doing, right? And that's not wrong in a lot of other arenas or areas or topics, right? Spaces, but in this particular one, it's not necessarily the best, because I don't think you're really getting anything out of it. If it is out of obligation for another person, you're really just trying to support or show support for that person rather than getting what you can get out of church. So that's a little bit of a gray area. Second anecdote here that I'm going to talk about is a more specific example. So I'm not going to use specific names, but I'll use some sort of name drops here in a certain way, and hopefully you're not already confused. But this deals with my aunt and uncle. So, and hopefully my aunt is okay with me sharing this. But recently, my uncle had passed away a little bit over a year ago now, maybe like a year and a half ago now. And they had a memorial service for him last year. And actually, this is, depending on when this episode drops, it was in 2024. So I'm recording this at the end of 2025, but it was in 2024. So we had a memorial for him, and my aunt shared a personal story about my uncle and about his journey to the church as well. So my aunt has a little bit of a background, grew up Catholic, and then I think she had a break or a split from the church for a while, and then she came back, and she is now a Baptist. And she was becoming more heavily involved with the church, feeling like she wanted to be a bigger part of the church, give back more to the church. So she started to work for a local Baptist church where she was at. And this was right around the time where she was also going through a tough time. I never knew this until the memorial service. She said she was going through a tough time with my uncle and possibly even contemplating divorce. And it was a really tough time for her. And she was, kind of giving this vibe that she was at her wit's end, right? Like she didn't really know what else to do. And she thought that there was this really big split between them and their viewpoints and whatnot. And she was trying to be a little bit more religious and going down that path. And she wasn't seeing that in my uncle. Anyway, long story short here, she said that, she prayed and she was looking for a sign and she, was trying to get some sort of feedback and see whether or not, this was, something that she wanted to continue. Even though she was married, and she was married for a number of years to my uncle, she was doubting it, I think, at a certain point. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, she said, out of nowhere, my uncle turned to her and he said, "Okay, let's go to church." And he became more heavily involved in it, and he kind of took off from there, and he became, almost as involved as my aunt was in the church, and he played more of a backup supporting role. Again, I think more so for my aunt here, and kind of wrapping it back around to the obligation portion of this episode, and maybe not necessarily out of his own faith to, at least to start, to go back to the church. I think my uncle caught wind of this at some point in time and was like, this is very important for my wife and I want to show my support. And, I'm going to do this. And I think if only at the start, it was probably more heavily weighted towards this idea of supporting my aunt more so than him wanting to get more out of the church. Okay. And again, this is just my opinion on things, but that's how I took it from that story, and from what I knew about my aunt and uncle, and what I know about my aunt and uncle. So what I mean to say by that is, if it is out of obligation to your spouse, that's not necessarily the best reason to jump in on this faith journey. However, it could be a decent starting point. If I want to see a silver lining here on this portion of it and not just be completely negative about it, I think it could be a decent or a nice jumping off point to something better. Like I think with my uncle, it probably, that might have been how it started, but maybe it turned into something deeper for him as he continued down that journey. Right? So it's not all bad out of obligation. The second part that I said is out of obligation to God, and that isn't necessarily the best either. You shouldn't really feel like you have to, like, quote unquote, like have to go to work, to church, right, out of this obligation to God. Now, going back to my original example with the other person in my family that I had mentioned is the first, example of spousal support or obligation to your spouse here. The second portion of that I believe for this person is because I think it's also out of some form of payback, right? So here we go with the, rub my hands together. Here we go with the Hollywood connections here, or my movie connections, because that's how I like to relate to a lot of things in life, even though a lot of stuff is highly fictionized, whatever. You can pull some truth out of this stuff, that's for sure. Here's an obscure one, too. Let's talk about Constantine and Keanu Reeves' character, right? If you've ever seen that movie, I don't know if it was a remake or not, but I think a lot of people are looking for the sequel, so hopefully that comes out somewhat soon. But anyway, in that movie, his character of John Constantine ends up, this is based off of a comic book adaptation, he is doing what he does, which is, I think he's an exorcist, and he basically drives demons back to hell kind of thing, right? very gritty kind of flick. But what he's doing in that movie, and a big takeaway that you can take from that movie, is that he's doing all of this work to sort of like buy his way into heaven, right? Or as some form of payback, right? Because the background for this guy or this character, and here's a spoiler alert, so if you haven't seen it, you might not want to continue on this one or jump ahead a little bit. But, he ends up trying to commit suicide, and he comes back. So he ends up seeing the other side and seeing what it's all about. And he feels like, out of, again, some sort of obligation, but also out of like payback, that by doing this work of these, exorcisms and fighting demons and whatnot, that he will kind of buy his way into heaven. And that's what I think it was the archangel, I think it was Gabriel, who was depicted by, God, I'm forgetting her name right now, but she played the Ancient One in the Marvels too. But anyway, she's basically telling him, like, you can't buy your way into heaven. That's not how it works, right? And I believe that for sure. But the reason why I'm going down this side tangent into Hollywood here is because I want to rope this back into this other person that is a close family member who I feel like the reason number two, the first reason is obligation to this person's spouse, but the other reason I think is because this person is looking at it as maybe some sort of additional obligation or payback in some way, because this person has had some medical issues and they feel like maybe, they were flirting with death themselves, right? Maybe they were thinking, this is a close one. I want to be here for my family. They have kids as well. And, they're probably thinking, well, I got to go to church. I got to pay back God. I have to, show my obligation and my dedication to this, and pay my respects to God and thank God in that way. And one of the ways that I'm going to do that is by going to church, dressing up nice and whatnot, and showing up. And unfortunately, while the intention might be there, I still don't think that is a solid or a legit reason to go to church. I don't think that's a decent reason to go to church. Now, that might come across a little wrong there, but just think about it there. This whole like payback, or I had a brush with death, or I had a close call, or like the angels or somebody's got to be looking after me, so I got to pay it forward in this way. But is that really how you pay it forward? Is that really how you do it? Especially if your mindset isn't really there, right? If your mindset is, again, like, I feel like peanut butter and jelly, right? Like, if I'm going to show a dedication to God and the church, then I have to go to church, right? I have to go every Sunday, and that's how I show my dedication. But are you really in it? Is your mindset really in it? Are you really getting what you need to out of church, or are you just using this, not necessarily as a tool, but as something that you feel like you have to do? And that's what I'm really getting at there. Like, if it's something that you feel like, oh man, I have to do this out of some sort of obligation, then that's probably not the right way to do it. Okay, that's the first one. Took me a while to get through that one, so apologies on that, but I wanted to get into those personal stories there, because I always love sharing those with you guys. Second reason here, as not necessarily the best reason to go to church, would be to be a better person. Now, that it sounds altruistic. It sounds like it's for the right reasons, but this can be a gray area as well. So let me explain a little bit more what I mean by that. If you feel like, hey, if I go to church, if I put in the rich time, right, I put in the hours and everything, and I try my very best, then I'm going to be a better person for it. Right? Like somehow it's like magically transforming you into being a better person because of the fact that you're going. And that's not really the best reason, right? You probably want that as a byproduct. That's probably something that you're thinking that you want out of it. But if it's something where you're like, if I get let's try to describe this as a math problem. Like, if I go to church, that's the A, then I will be a better person. That's the B, right? Like, if I go to church, then it'll equal me being a better person, like through some sort of divine intervention. It's like that doesn't happen like that, right? There's no like magic brush or magic car wash. Like you come in one end and then come out just a completely perfect person, right? And I've heard my wife kind of describe it that way too. Like, oh, I thought you went to church to try and be a better person, or try to, try to get rid of all your problems and kind of cleanse yourself in that way. And it's like, well, sorta, yeah, I do, but it takes work on behalf of the person in order to achieve that, not through some sort of divine intervention that, again, magically cascades over you just by attending mass or attending church. I don't think that really happens. And the last reason that I have here is part of like a gray area, or not necessarily the best reasons to go to church, would be the holiday and special event crowd. We're talking about communions, we're talking about baptisms, confirmations, like that kind of crowd, right? The special occasion crowd, it's, even I'm kind of stumped by that one nowadays. It's like, I don't even know if the parents are necessarily wholeheartedly into it. Like, they want to set an example for their kids, but like, are they really into it? Because they may not necessarily go that frequently to church. And I don't know, that one's kind of weird to me. The special events crowd is kind of an interesting one to me, because again, it sort of goes back to obligation a little bit. But this is even less so. This is kind of just like, it's not even on like a weekly or every other week kind of basis. It's like it's Christmas, so one of the things that we can do, we consider ourselves Catholic, let's just go to church kind of thing. It's like, I really don't understand that one at all, really. So, I've heard it said, and I won't point fingers on this one specifically, but I've heard it said from at least one other person that I'm close to, that they don't necessarily have to go to church in order to have that kind of connection or communication with God. In a certain way, I agree with that, and I think that's true. It holds some sort of truth to it. But, and I guess this is a good transition into some of the reasons to go to church, but I feel like in that regard, what this person said is like, anybody can pray at any time, or try to have some sort of communication with God or with JC here. But I think, to take it a step further, you want to go to church, and here's why. And here's, some of the reasons why I think you should be going to church. One, to me, is to commune more closely with God, or to communicate. Maybe you want to go to confession. Maybe you want to utilize some of the other tools that the church offers. Get some things off of your chest. Talk about some things either with a priest or somebody else. But even by going to Mass, I think it's an easier way for you to get into a mindset of being closer to God, the Scripture, to Jesus, Holy Spirit, the whole nine, right? You want to show that you're showing up in order to have a closer connection with God and your faith. That's one of the biggies for me, for sure. Another reason why you might consider going, I'm trying to refrain from using like, these are the right reasons to go to church, and these are the wrong reasons, because I want to shy away from that. I want to, just kind of say like, maybe you want to go for these reasons, and maybe you don't want to go for these other reasons. But another reason why you might want to go is to really, and again, this is kind of going into what the different things that the church has to offer, but it's to really try to soak in. For me personally, it's to try and soak in the homily and how it relates to the different passages for that particular week. And that's a big one for me. Like, I really look forward to the homily, and I really look forward to either, what the deacon's message or what the priest's message is in that homily, and how it relates to the particular Bible passages that are read, right? The first and second verse, right? Or the first and second passages, sorry. And to me, I get a lot out of that, because that's really either the deacon or the priest's chance to bring these passages into the, from the Bible into the real world, right? Like have their own personal anecdotes, sort of like what I'm doing here with the podcast, of like trying to bring it into reality, using their personal examples of what they've seen in life to try and make that passage or scripture or Bible verse more modern, I guess you could say, but also bringing it up to speed or making it more relatable to the everyday people, right? And some of the best priests are the ones that really knock it out of the park here with that homily. That's their chance, in my opinion. And for the ones who just kind of glaze over it, or just, you're not really, getting you're not feeling like a personal connection to that priest or deacon when they're dropping the message. That to me is a really, it's a missed opportunity there to really bring that alive. So that's what I really go for the homily. I really try to like have a connection from that personal, life into the scripture there. So that could be another reason why you go to church. And finally, I'll wrap this one up by giving you a personal example of my own and what I get out of church. Definitely the first two, for sure, but to make it even more personal here, for me, there's always a moment, and maybe you have this too, and if you do, again, light up the comments, let me know. But for me personally, there always seems to be at least one moment when I'm in church where I feel like a certain wave of peace that comes over me. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know, it comes at different times. It's not always the same time every single time that I go. But for whatever reason, it's almost like, I can take that deep breath. I can feel a certain level of a weight lifted off of my shoulders is what it feels like. And that's the best way that I can describe it. It's almost like, in your regular everyday life, you might have different stresses and stuff, and you forget to breathe, right? It's almost like when you go to church, it's like you can take that extra breath, right? You can inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth, kind of thing. And for whatever reason, you get that really good deep breath in there, and this wave of peace kind of comes over me. I don't know how to describe it any other way than that. And it does feel like a certain weight is lifted off of my shoulders. It feels like you're kind of like dropping some of that everyday baggage, right? That stress by going to church. That's what I get out of it, for sure. And that's my personal anecdote for it. But also, for me, I also like to show that personal dedication that I have towards my faith. And to me, it's continually strengthened by continuing to go to church. It's almost like you're renewing this dedication that you have. And to me, the dedication is different than obligation, I would say. Because again, obligation is sort of like you feel like you have to. Dedication is like, I want to, right? Like it's something that's important to me because I get something out of it and I feel better for it, right? Or I feel like I'm better for it. Not that it's making me a better person, right? I want to, this is kind of weird because a lot of these different categories sort of like tiptoe that line and can easily go one way or another. But for me personally, it's like it's more of a dedication because I want to go, because I feel like I could get the tools to make me a better person. Not that it magically makes me a better person, but that I feel like I can get the tools to use those tools to try and make me a better person, if that makes sense to you. And, to me, it's almost like a reminder weekly of like, this is why I go. This is why I do it, right? It's to remember the reasons why you went in the first place and to continually remind yourself why you want to keep going now and in the future. So that's what I have for you this week. This is sort of like an appetizer, right? An appetizer into this whole like church series that I kind of see. And this was the softball one, the foundation one. I really just wanted to provide some of the reasons why we might think about going to church, just to start off with. I've got some juicy stuff. I have it's almost going to be an entire episode that's going to be dedicated just to talking about one story that I have in regards to the types of people that might go to church that I think you'll really enjoy. So that's kind of a snippet for something in the future. I don't know when I'm going to get around to that. Again, I like to pepper things here and there instead of just going like straight shot, like this is part 1, and then next week is going to be part 2, and then the following week is part 3. Nah, I kind of like to intersperse them and mix them in and out, sort of like what I'm doing with the Ten Commandment episodes as well. I don't usually line my ducks in a row that way. Maybe sometimes I'll do that if it's a really juicy one that I want to do a sequel for, but I kind of like to keep you guys guessing a little bit and mix it up from week to week, especially if this isn't really your type of episode and you wanted to mix it up and go like, all right, I don't want to tune into the next one if it's just going to be a continuation of this kind of thing. So whatever, all that to say is I like to mix it up. Again, here's a reminder at the end of the episode here. I want to hear from you guys. Light up the comments, particularly on YouTube and over on Spotify. They have a comments section on each either video or episode. Again, it's just the Believe podcast with this thumbnail here. It's the same thumbnail. So hopefully you'll be able to find it. It might be a little bit more difficult because I probably don't have any subs yet or followers or whatever they want to call it nowadays. But I'm there. I'm on both platforms there. I'm going to try to get into other platforms. I don't think they're quite as pop. I'm also on Apple Podcasts, like I said, but if you want to drop a comment, you got to go to those other two. But yeah, I want to hear from you. What are the reasons why you go to church? What are the reasons why your family goes to church, or your friends, or your spouse, your immediate family, right? What are some of the reasons why you see other people going to church? What concerns you about why people go to church? Is it people who are close to you, or is it some other story that you've heard from somebody else in some sort of church group or whatever? I want to hear the personal anecdotes that you guys have to share or want to share on this. As always, if you don't want me to share it on a future Q&A, just say that in your comment, like, please don't share this. Or, if you're okay with me sharing it, you don't want me to share your name, just say it's okay to share this post, but please don't use my name. Something to that effect. Otherwise, it's free game, and I'm just going to use it because I need that fuel for this show. So that's it for this one. Thanks for listening in this week. If you haven't listened to the other episodes on this podcast yet, please dive back and check it out. It's really good jamming music if you're out on the road or traveling or whatnot. These should be pretty easy listening kind of pieces for you to add into your podcast repertoire here. But thanks again for listening. Again, I'm Dave. This is the Believe Podcast, and I don't have a precursor for the next one. Probably going to be another Ten Commandments one. I don't know. I got a few things that I'm thinking about here, but I want to keep it rolling also in that series. So I don't know. It could be that, or it could be something else, but I will talk to you on the next one.